Thanks for checking out the weekly sermon from Church of the Resurrection. I pray that God will use this message to speak to you and help you grow in your faith journey. If you're in the KC area, I'd like to invite you to join us next week at one of our services, or join us in live worship online at core.org/worship. Church of the Resurrection is one church in multiple locations. To learn more about the service times in our ministries, please visit core.org. Hope you enjoy this week's message.
Laced up ready at the starting line. Focused on my attitude and on my time. A champion is what I'll be, fast or slow. Love is the real victory, now go, go, go. World changing, rearranging sand in my hourglass. I was made for good by you. Ooh, 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 ooh. I wanna raise a banner.
I wanna raise a banner.
Love's the way.
Love's the way.
Every day.
Every day.
I wanna be a champion.
I wanna be a champion.
Jesus' way.
Jesus' way.
Every day.
Every day.
Laced up ready at the starting line. Focused on my attitude and on my time. A champion is what I'll be, fast or slow. Love is the real victory, now go, go, go. World changing, rearranging sand in my hourglass. I was made for good by you. Ooh, 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 ooh. I wanna raise a banner.
I wanna raise a banner.
Love's the way.
Love's the way.
Every day.
Every day.
I wanna be a champion.
I wanna be a champion.
Jesus' way.
Jesus' way.
Every day.
Every day.
Walk like a champ, talk like a champ, serve like a love, like a born to be a champion. Walk like a champ, talk like a champ, serve like a love, like a born to be a champion. Walk like a champ, talk like a champ, serve like a love, like a born to be a champion. Walk like a champ, talk like a champ, serve like a love, like a born to be a champion. Yeah, yeah. I wanna raise a banner.
I wanna raise a banner.
Love's the way.
Love's the way.
Every day.
Every day.
I wanna be a champion.
I wanna be a champion.
Jesus' way.
Jesus' way.
Every day. Every day.
Well, as you just saw, this last week we had 1,660 children, most of them here in the Kansas City area, but hundreds of them across the country who were joining us for Vacation Bible Camp. When we originally planned Vacation Bible Camp this summer, we didn't anticipate a pandemic. We planned this, and the theme, which you can see on my t-shirt, Live Like a Champ, we planned this theme because the Kansas City Chiefs, if you haven't heard, won the Super Bowl this last year. Well, I'm hoping you've already heard that before. And so we are the world champions in football here in Kansas City. Pretty excited about that. And we planned our Vacation Bible School about living like a champ. And then we knew that this summer was going to be the Summer Olympics. And so we thought this is going to work perfect. This is going to Summer Olympics, and we're going to be, in Olympic season while we're also talking about Vacation Bible Camp. And so we were going to tie all of this together. And of course, there were no Summer Olympics this year. They've been postponed because of the pandemic. And yet we had a great time. And of course, we didn't get to have 1,660 kids in our sanctuary for Vacation Bible Camp and around our campus. We did it at home. And each one of those kids received a box with like 140 different sheets of paper and crafts and cool things that they could do and videos online so that they could be, they could learn and they could grow together. And it was awesome. It was really so exciting. And having looked over this material as our kids were getting ready to study it and getting prepared to teach this with our granddaughter, Stella, I began thinking, you know what? Our adults need these lessons too. This is really some great stuff. And so today's sermon, we're going to be focusing on what it means to live like a champ. And by the time we're finished with the sermon, we're going to turn to two former Kansas City Chiefs who themselves were champs, and we're going to learn a little bit about the Christian life and about living as a champ from them. So with that in mind, I want to begin by reminding you that the word champion actually comes from a Latin word, campio, which means victor. And in the New Testament, we might look at sports and say, well, what does sports have to do with the Christian life? But it's interesting that the early apostles thought it had a lot to do with the Christian life. In fact, people were huge sports fans in the first century. So we know that Herod the Great built 2 stadiums in the Holy Land just before Jesus was born, one in Caesarea by the sea and one in Jerusalem. People were really into the games, and these games were foot races and all kinds of other games, athletic competitions. And across the Greco-Roman world, people were always into sports. You had in every major city a stadium that was there. The stadium was named after the stadia. It was a distance that one ran, about 200 yards. And so, stadiums everywhere, and every city was proud of its champions, its victors. And so when the Apostle Paul begins writing about the Christian life in the epistles, and not just Paul, the other epistle writers as well, he begins drawing upon these metaphors, knowing how crazy people were about sports. He spent 18 months in the town of Corinth, the city of Corinth, and they had the Isthmian Games every other year. And these were big, important games throughout the Greco-Roman world. And the people there, they were fired up about sports. And so when he's writing back to the church at Corinth, having spent 18 months there, he routinely or regularly uses athletic metaphors like this one. In 1 Corinthians 9, 24 and 25, he says, "Do you not know that in a race the runners all compete, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win it. Athletes exercise self-control in all that they do. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one." And that's the kind of metaphors he's drawing, like, train like the athletes when it comes to your Christian life. That's what he was talking about. And as he talked about that, he talked about an imperishable and a perishable wreath. So in the first century, you didn't compete for a ribbon or a trophy or a medal. It didn't work that way. Instead, you had a wreath that was made of, laurel leaves or sometimes olive branches or pine branches, or in Corinth, they were actually made of celery stalks that were wound together and placed on the head. This is an image of this is a tombstone of an athlete who was very successful in the first century. And what you see are all these different wreaths that he received in competing. And inside each of those wreaths is the city where he won these competitions, where he won the wreath. All of them having a slightly different wreath. This was a perishable wreath. And Paul says, compete for an imperishable wreath, the crown of life that you're going to receive when you enter God's eternal kingdom. All right, so as we're thinking about this, the kids learned this week, they had 5 days of Vacation Bible Camp, and there were 3, I've sort of grouped this together into 3 points for this sermon. Their first lesson was that you were born to be a champ. The second is that you were made to love and serve like a champ. And the third is that you were meant to talk and walk like a champ. We're going to talk about those today, and I want to begin with this idea of being born to be a champ. So the kids learned in the very first day of Vacation Bible Camp something that is a fundamental assertion of the scriptures and the Christian and the Jewish faith, and that is that God created you as a human being. God created human beings, and he knits you together in your mother's womb. So it's not only that he creates the race or the species, but he knits each of us together in our mother's wombs. And when God looks at us, he sees something that is treasured by God. We were created in the image of God, so we are sacred. There is a dignity that we have, a sacred worth that we have as human beings because we were made in the image of God. We belong to God, and we are treasured by God. Now, the kids looked at Psalm 139, and in Psalm 139, we read these words, "It was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made." I love this. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The Apostle Paul goes on in the New Testament to say that we are God's poema. We are God's workmanship, God's work of art, God's poetry. We are God's poetry. So God looks at us in this way. And I love this word when it says that we are fearfully made. The word in Hebrew is yareh. And yareh is a word that it does signify fear, but it can also signify something that's astonishing or amazing or awesome or awe-inspiring. So when we talk about the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom in the Old Testament, it's not like we're supposed to cower in fear of God. It's that we're to be astonished by God. We are amazed by God, just awe-inspired by God. But here, the scripture says that you were made, we as human beings, individually, are astounding in our creation. That it is amazing, this life that God has given to us. We ourselves are awe-inspiring, the human being. And so I want to take just a second and tell you about a few things that are making you awe-inspiring and amazing, just some simple facts about the human being. First of all, I learned something this week that's kind of an offhanded, kind of an odd thing, but your belly button has 67 different kinds of bacteria in it. Can you imagine that? Unless you have an Audi, and maybe it's a little less than that, I don't know. But then, we look at all these amazing things like this. You may know that you can smell a million different scents. Actually, that's not right. It's 1 trillion different scents. Scientists believe that you have the capacity with your nose to scent 1 trillion different scents. or smell 1 trillion different scents. Your eyes can differentiate between 2 and 7 million different colors. How amazing is that? The thoughts that run across your neurons on the fastest pathways, they run at 150 miles an hour, the thoughts that go across your brain. Did you know that your heart is a pump unlike any other pump that anybody has been able to fabricate? So your heart pumps your blood supply 1,000 times every day through your body. And over the course of your life, it's going to pump 3 billion times. I mean, how amazing is that? That pump, never requiring much, well, sometimes it requires a little help, but most of the time it just keeps going and going and going. And that's part of what God created and built into you. How amazing is that? I think about the cell, every human cell, and you see one on the video screen, every single human cell, how amazing they are. So these cells are they have inside them a biological battery that recharges. They have software that is your DNA, and that software holds enough data that's equivalent to, and every tiny little cell that you can't even see with the naked eye holds 1.5 gigabytes of data. That is basically the software for your body. I mean, it's astounding. You have 37 trillion cells in your body, and they know how to heal themselves. They know how to destroy themselves if they're in danger of causing harm. You have at the top of your head 3 pounds of gray matter. That 3 pounds of gray matter has an equivalent of memory of 1 petabyte. Now, a petabyte is 1,000,000 gigabytes of data that you can store in your brain. That's 223,000 feature-length films on a DVD that your brain has the capacity to store. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. I mean, it is awesome. You are amazing. Now you have the capacity to dream, to imagine, to hope, to love, to think, to reason, to speak, to analyze, to create, and so much more. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. There's not another one like you. Of all the human beings, even though you share 99.9% of the same DNA, there's not another human being quite like you. Beyond that, God looks at you personally as amazing, as astounding, as his beloved child. Doesn't matter your gifts or abilities, how smart or how unsmart you are. Doesn't matter whether you are abled or other-abled. God looks at you and says, you are amazing to me. I'm astounded by you. And I love you more than you could possibly imagine or believe. Your self-worth and your self-confidence, ultimately, this is what we were trying to teach the children this week, comes from that knowledge. Like, this is what I desperately want my granddaughter to know. This is what I wanted my children to know as they were growing up. You matter. You are somebody. You have sacred worth because God created you, because God doesn't make, and I know this sounds trite, but God doesn't make junk. And you are not junk to God. You are treasured. You are astounding. You are beloved by and of God. And when you believe that, when you trust that, right, no matter what anybody else says about you, no matter how many times you have failed and you get knocked on your butt and you have to get back up, you still remember, I matter to God. I have sacred worth to God. I remember when I was in high school, I was 14 years old. My mom and dad had gotten divorced a couple years before. My mom remarried. We'd moved, I think 3 times in 3 years. And we'd moved out to a place in the country called Blue Valley, which is actually where this sanctuary is located today. Not right on this spot, but a couple miles south of here is where we moved. And here I was, 14 years old. I didn't know anybody in my school. I didn't, I was feeling pretty low about myself. I remember my mom and I had this big old knockdown, drag-out fight, and by the end of that, I'm feeling like, you know what? Why were you even born? Like, nobody cares about you. Nobody loves you. And I had just started going to church, and I just started reading the Bible. And I remember I was sitting on my bedroom at 159th and Outlook, right next to Blue Valley High School, and I'm sitting there, I'm starting to cry, and I'm just feeling like, what's the point of going on? And I heard this voice. Some of you who are part of Resurrection have heard me tell this story before. I heard this voice, and it wasn't with my ears, but it was a thought that was so strong and felt like something so outside of me. And this is what I heard it say. Adam, I know you, and I wanted you, and I love you, and that's all that matters. And then I felt like there were these arms holding me. I mean, right there, I stopped crying. I just sat there. I just basked in the sense of God's amazing love. And I would tell you the same is true of you. God looks at you and says, you matter to me, and I love you, and I wanted you, no matter what anybody else says about you. So I want you to be able to say when you're feeling low, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Sometimes there's a little humor in that. Lavon and I, we don't always get along in the kitchen. So I've been trying to help a little more in the kitchen lately. I'm trying to be a better husband. And so I've been trying to help in the kitchen, but I don't put the dishes in the dishwasher the way she likes them put in the dishwasher. And with kitchen, the wash rags in the sink, like after 2 days, I want to throw it in the, in the washing machine. So I'm taking this wash rag and I'm putting it in the washing machine. Like, Lavon's like, it's only 2 days old. We just got it out day before yesterday. I'm like, yeah, I know. And she's like, you are a piece of work. And my response was, no, honey, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Well, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. All right, so that's the first lesson of Vacation Bible Camp. That was the first day of VBC, and it's the foundation of everything else. By the way, that's also the foundation of human rights. So in our Declaration of Independence, we say that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people, we would say today, are created equal. And they are endowed, remember? Endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, right? Our human rights are rooted and grounded in our worth and value as human beings created in the image of God. You have value and worth to God. So the second thing that the kids learned, so Tuesday and Wednesday, they were learning these two themes, that we are called to love and to serve like a champion. So I'm going to combine those together. They really work really well together. So we are called to love and serve like a champion. What does that mean? Well, when we love and serve as a champion, we remember that what it means to win in the game of life. Jesus says this, when you lose your life, you find life. Jesus gets down on his knees and he washes his disciples' feet and he says, hey, this is what it's really all about. Pay attention, because true greatness is found in serving. Listen, he says this at the Last Supper, I give you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. So you must also love each other. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other. Jesus defines what it means to win at the game of life, right? And Paul captures this in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I can speak with the tongues of mortals and of angels, but if I do not have love, I am nothing, right? You can make all the money in the world, you can win multiple Super Bowl rings, and you can still find yourself missing out on what it means to be human if you don't understand that you were created by God in the image of God to reflect God's love to other people, right? And that love isn't a warm, fuzzy feeling. Right? It is a way of acting and being. It is a way of looking at the other person and saying, my job, God has commissioned me to love and care for you, to serve and to bless you, right? We don't even have to like the people that we're loving. Sometimes we don't like them at all. Sometimes they're frustrating and irritating people, and yet God still calls me to love, right? And so that's what our children were learning this week. We are called to practice agape. Agape is the Greek word that means selfless or sacrificial love. It's, again, not a feeling. It's a way of being and acting, right? To put the needs of the other before yourself, or to try to build up and bless, even when somebody, in fact, particularly when somebody doesn't deserve it. When somebody doesn't deserve your kindness, we call that grace. That's unmerited favor, or kindness given when somebody else doesn't deserve it. So I was thinking about this week, and how, the awesome thing about this idea that we're called to, to be a champion is to love and serve, is it doesn't matter how smart you are, you can be a champion. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how athletic you are, how musically gifted you are. It doesn't matter how fat or skinny you are, or how beautiful you are, or how homely you are. None of those things really matter when it comes to really winning at the game of life, because to win at the game of life and true beauty in the game of life and success in life is how well you love people, how well you loved and served others. That's what Jesus was teaching. And he gave us the pinnacle example of that when he hangs on a cross and lays down his life for the human race. Right? He's showing us what love and service actually looks like. And so most of us are not going to die on a cross for anybody else. We're not going to lay down our lives literally, but we do have a chance to serve other people. And every day you're sent out on that mission. You wake up and you go out, whether it's to the grocery store or the workplace or in your family. And this is how we're meant to live if we're champions. Right? So we train in order to be like this. I was thinking about how many funerals I've done, and I've done over 300 funerals in the last 30 years here as the senior pastor at Church of the Resurrection. Here's what I find interesting. I have never sat down with somebody, so you sit with the family members, and I get my notepad, and I say, tell me about your loved one, and I've never had somebody say, hey, could you tell, and we're getting notes so I can talk about them, eulogize them. I've never had somebody say, hey, tell the people about my dad's Rolex. Or tell them about that awesome office that he had in the corner with that mahogany furniture. Or tell them about how much my dad made, right? Nobody talks about that stuff. The lives that are really well celebrated and really well lived, people, the family members saying, let me tell you about how my dad cared about people. Let me tell you about how my mom was always serving other people and always thinking about other people above herself. So I guess I'd just ask you, as you think about, what you hope people might say when you're gone, Are they going to be able to say, you know, the thing about her or the thing about him is they really did try to love. They were a champion when it came to love. They were a champion when it came to serving other people, when it came to a purpose bigger than themselves. Our kids at Vacation Bible Camp this week were raising money to build boreholes in Malawi in Africa. So a lot of times in Vacation Bible Camp, we're focused on the needs here in Kansas City. And the kids, you know, when they come here to the church, they bring school supplies for kids here in Kansas City, or, you know, other things that we do to help people in Kansas City. But we also at Church of the Resurrection have an emphasis on serving in other parts of the world where among the, you know, many of the poorest of the poor live. And so we've been engaged in Malawi for a number of years. This is one of the lowest per capita incomes in the world, this little sliver of a country. And this week, the kids were invited to give, using their phones they could give, or their parents' phones, they could give to help build boreholes. These are clean water wells in this little country of Malawi. We've built 50 of them so far as a church, and the kids are going to build 2 this week, and they raised enough money to build more than 2, just over 2 of these boreholes. I want you to listen and hear a little more about what they were doing as they were trying to be champions when it came to loving and serving. Take a listen. The man you're about to hear, Hugo, is one of our staff members in Malawi in Africa who coordinates our projects there. Take a listen.
Water is a big challenge here in Malawi, and because of that challenge, most of our children would go to school without even taking a bath. And sometimes also they will suffer from diarrhea, which is a very common disease here in Malawi due to the fact that our water is not safe and is not clean as well. This is the stream where these women used to draw water, and this is how they used to do it. But for them to be able to find enough water, they would have to come here as early as 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. Just check out the quality of water, and this is the reason why we say our children normally face this challenge of diarrhea. Now we are at the site where we drill the borehole, and you can see how excited these children are because now they have clean water that they can use to bath, and the issues of diarrhea are no longer. And that's why you could see them singing joyfully, because we have provided them with clean water. And this is how clean water can change lives and the lives of our children here in Malawi.
So what's cool is our kids, those 1,660 kids, built 2 boreholes. They provided the funds to build 2 boreholes in Malawi. These are going to serve villages with 800 to 1,000 people in them. And all of a sudden, kids not getting sick with dysentery, kids being able to bathe, people being able to wash their clothes. All of these things are happening because our kids learned that to be a champion is to love and serve. I was thinking about this week. I was watching this video and I thought, you know, $5,000 to build one of those boreholes. I thought, you know, I wonder if my family could do that. So I called the church office. I talked to our head of missions. I said, is it possible for like families to build a borehole there? And could we find out the village name and be able to see pictures of it? And when the borehole's built, we can have that on our refrigerator and invest in that, in that community. And Carol Cartmel said, yeah, we can make that happen, sure. So I sent an email to my daughters, and then I sent an email to my siblings. And I said, what would y'all think if we tried, would any of you be interested in going in together and giving the money to, as a family, building a borehole for a village in Africa? And immediately my siblings, my kids, instantly said, hey, we want to do that, Dad, let's make that happen. Or Adam, we want to do that, let's make it happen. And it got me thinking that there's maybe some of you who would be interested in doing the same thing. It's $5,000 to do that. That's way out of reach for many people, but maybe you can contribute or help with part of it. Maybe you give $10 or $50 or something to that. But if you're interested in doing that, I want you to be able to take out your phone, or you just write this down if you want to, but you can take out your phone and go to, as you're texting, text 77977, and text the letters CORE. This is the same thing we do with the offering, COR, to 77977. And then when you're on there, you're going to be able to scroll down on the cause that you're going to give to. And when you scroll down, you're going to scroll down to VBC Missions Malawi Clean Water. And I would love to see us help the kids. They built 2 boreholes. I wonder if we could build another 5 or 10. And so maybe some of you would say, hey, I want to do that with my family, or maybe some of you would say, I'd like our company to do that. Our company would like to build a borehole. There's no shortage of villages that need a borehole in Malawi, and if you think that's something you'd be interested in doing, Or if you don't want to use your phone for that, you want to take the time to contact other people, do that, and then contact the church and say, hey, we're ready. We'd like to purchase a borehole. We'd like to provide a borehole. And then we'll send you pictures. It'll be months before all these boreholes are drilled, but we'll be happy to send you a picture and say, this is what your family did, or this is what your company did to provide clean drinking water in these communities. I just think that's so cool. I think it's really rewarding when you have a chance to make a difference that way. All right, and that leads me to one last point that the kids learned this week in Vacation Bible Camp, and that is to walk and talk, actually to talk and walk like a champion. So Thursday was talking and Friday was walking, and we're going to talk primarily about talking for just a moment. And this was one of the memory verses that the kids had, and we've given this to you. If you go to cor.org/next, you can download this for your phone. So I have it as my memory verse for this week on my phone. But these are the words. Say it with me out loud if you would. Kind words are like honey. They are sweet to the spirit and bring healing to the body. I love that. Kind words are like honey. They are sweet to the spirit and bring healing to the body. And when you remember that, right, this is living out love with the words that you speak. Like, you have a chance to provide kind words that bring healing to people's body and spirit. I mean, we're called to do that. And this is what the memory verse looks like. You'll see it up on the screen. So if you were to download this, and you will find, you can download it and you can save it on your phone, and then you'll see it on the left-hand side there. That's the one that you use for the phone, or there's another one that you can print off and have as a memory verse at home. I'd love for you to join the children in memorizing this verse this week. So just a couple other things we read in Scripture. James talks about the power of the tongue, and he says, with the tongue we both bless the Lord and Father and curse human beings made in God's likeness. Blessing and cursing come from the same mouth. My brothers and sisters, it shouldn't be this way. And then James goes on to say this, the tongue is a small fire, a world of evil at work in us. We're in the midst of a political election season. I've been watching all the postcards I'm getting in the mail. Now, I can't tell you who these were from. If it's a Resurrection member, I'm sorry for mentioning this, but some of these postcards I'm getting in the election don't tell me anything about the candidate and their hopes and dreams and aspirations and why I should vote for them. All they're doing is telling me all the bad things about somebody else. Like, most of the time when I'm reading, if I do take the time to look at the headlines, I'm thinking, I can't hardly even believe that most of that's true of this other person. But please just tell me what's great about you, why you should be elected, why I should support you because of your vision, your hopes and dreams, and how you want to serve our community. Tell us that. Don't tell us about how bad other people are. I love how Paul says this, a memory verse we had several years ago. We've said this over and over and over again here at Church of the Resurrection. Why don't you say this with me? Let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. Speaking of how our words can bring healing, as our memory verse had noted, I was praying with a woman this week. Her name's Jane. She's a very active member of our congregation, very active in our backpack program for kids here in the city. And she has stage 4 ovarian cancer, and I was calling her to pray for her, got on my knees next to my bed and lifted her up in prayer. And she told me about something that was happening later that day, and she ended up sending me a picture of it. And people in her Sunday school class, I think it was, or her Bible study, or her, the groups that work with her here at church, they had a parade that day at her house. And in that parade, people had painted things on their car windows. They couldn't, get out and hug her like they would have wanted to, but they painted words on her windows, rolled down on their car windows, rolled down their windows, held up signs, and just shouted out to her that they loved her. Their words brought grace to her. Here's a picture, and I love this. We love you, Jane. And there was car after car after car going down the street with folks who just stopped to say, we love you, Jane. We're praying for you, Jane. That's what love looks like when it's spoken, right? Those are the words that bring healing in our lives. All right, so I want to take just a moment as we're closing the sermon to invite a couple of former NFL players, members of Church of the Resurrection, who know what it's like to win on and off the field, to join me. And I want to ask them a couple of questions as athletes and as Christians to reflect upon how they see these things we've just talked about in real life. So I'd like to invite Kevin Lockett and Trent Green to join me. Kevin was an academic All-American playing for K-State, set a ton of records over there. He was a second-round draft pick by the Kansas City Chiefs, where he played wide receiver and punt returner. He played for the Chiefs. He played for Washington, the Jaguars, and the Jets. He knew what it was like to win. The one season he was here, 13-3, the 97 season. And, of course, he knew what it was like to lose in football as well from time to time. And today he's a CFO for a biotech company here in Kansas City. Trent Green played quarterback in the NFL for 15 years. He was in 2 Pro Bowls. He was part of the Super Bowl 34 championship team, the Rams. He had over 4,000 yards, 3 years, 3 seasons in a row. He was 4 years. He had a QB rating of 90 or above. In Kansas City, he played for the Kansas City Chiefs for a number of years, and he is considered actually for the longest time, he was considered right after Lynn Dawson, the greatest quarterback Kansas City ever known, until there was this upstart young guy named Patrick Mahomes who came along. And now they're kind of a triumvirate of great quarterbacks that played for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'd like to invite them to join me as we're going to ask them some questions about the game of life and winning at the game of life. Guys, it's great to have you here today. Thank you so much. And I'm really grateful for your role at Church of the Resurrection and your faith and the way you live out your faith. I want to ask you a couple of questions today. So I want to begin this idea of knowing that you were born a champion, that you have value and worth. I'm guessing in your work as a football player, self-confidence is really critical. Tell me about that.
Well, I'll start. So self-confidence is an absolute, right? And so I played wide receiver, and being able to know that you're always taught to catch the football with your hands, and you can really see very early on when players lose their confidence, they're starting to catch the ball with their body, and they're starting to get down upon themselves. So self-confidence is critical, and I think it's really the same way in our daily lives, right? We gain confidence by having consistency in terms of what we do, and so it wasn't until early into my career, my third year into the league, when I came to know Christ. And so I started to understand that I didn't have to be defined by football, and that there was more to me in terms of being a champion. And I think through the understanding and learning of that, I gained confidence in not only myself, but then in also understanding that my performance alone on the field shouldn't dictate whether I had a good day or a bad day, or whether I was a good person or a bad person.
That's excellent. I mean, in our daily lives, that's true for everybody, right? You know, both the need for self-confidence, but also when things don't go very well, to know, look, who I am isn't defined by my mistake today or my failure here or there. How about you, Trent? Being a QB, what is it like, the need for confidence?
Well, and I think along the same lines as Kevin, I think the difference that I have is, as a quarterback, you not only have to exude confidence and believe in yourself, but you have to convey that to everyone else, because as a quarterback, you're the leader. You're the leader in the huddle of those other 10 guys. You're the leader on the sideline. In the NFL's case, the 53 guys that are there on the sideline, and you ultimately want to convey to them a positive feeling that, hey, this play is going to work. This game is going to be a win. You have to find ways to get that done, and I think that was always an important part for me. And I think when you start looking at the positives in who you are as a player and who you are as a person, since this is not only the game of football but the game of life, what we're talking about here is you have to believe in faith. You have to believe that God has a plan for you. And that's why this sermon is such an important thing right now, not only for kids and young adults, but for adults as well, just having that purpose in life. And I think that was an important part for me as a player, to convey that to everyone else, but also in the game of life as well.
Absolutely. And both of you guys had a place where you finally, your career was going to be over with. You know, I remember when you were hurt, and I think you probably got hurt a few times as well out there. And you come to the end of your career, and then it's like, well, who am I now? I was a professional football player, and yet for both of you, who you are off the field wasn't defined, as you said, by football. It's defined by your relationship with God. So, tell me, when you were done with the NFL, how did you think about who am I now?
Well, I think that was an important part for Julie and I. When I retired after the 2008 season, my last season was back in St. Louis with the Rams. And when we moved back here to Kansas City, I had the conversation with you, Adam, about why it was important for us to come back to Kansas City, because I felt it would be an insult to God. Here, God had granted me these gifts of playing football and be able to make a living playing a game, playing a sport. It would have been an insult to God not to take advantage of that. So we decided as a family, where could we have the biggest impact? The biggest impact for us would be here in Kansas City. As you said, I was the quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs for 6 seasons. So coming back here, being able to have an impact in the community, being able to raise our kids in the Kansas City community, that was an important part for us.
Right, and that's been, as I've watched you over the years, you've asked, how can I use my influence for good? How can I use it for kingdom purposes or for impacting other people's lives in a positive way? And Kevin, I know you've done the same thing. This has been an important part of who you are.
Well, for me, that came to light right after I got drafted. When I got to the locker room, it was the first time I was in a locker room where there were guys in there that were actually married and had families. It wasn't like that in college. It wasn't like that in high school. And so what I noticed is, as I observed these guys, there were things that were more important to them, or equally as important as football was. And so they were trying to be great fathers. They were trying to be great husbands. And so I realized that being a champion was more than just simply winning on Sunday. And so that started to change my definition of what being a champion was. And so, as I played and then when I got out, I realized that there's more worth than just winning a game. And so what was important to me was, how can I be a better father, better husband, better son? How can I be a better steward of the things that God has blessed me with? How can I impact my community? So all of those things became important.
I love that. So Kevin, when we were talking earlier, and you were talking about how you define success. How do you define success as a human being and as a Christian? It was, I'm guessing, pretty easy when you were first playing football. Like, success was winning. It was, the number of yards, the number of receptions. Yeah. But somewhere that changed for you. How do you define success?
Yeah, so it changed for me again in that third year when I finally came to Christ. And I think what I realized was all of the practice that would go into trying to win a game on Sunday. That it wasn't much different when you talk about our daily lives. And so once I came to know who Christ was, for me it became being a champion was also, how am I going to live every day, right? Every day am I going to chase and pursue what we're taught to do from the Bible. And so that now is how I define success. And so winning is great, but I think winning in life and winning in who we are supposed to be in Christ is even more important. And so today, every day, I try to wake up and I try to die to myself and to just live out what we're taught to do in the Bible.
That's awesome. Trent, I want to end with you. And we were talking in the sermon about talking and our words and how our words either tear people down or build them up. And you're having conversations in the huddle. You've got coaches that are having conversations with y'all. Tell me about the power of words, and both in football and in daily life.
Well, I think that's such an important thing, especially with the way social media is handled today. It's a faceless thing, so people can say whatever comments they want. So having that faith in God, having that faith in yourself, believing in yourself, trying to stay positive. I've always tried to walk a certain way, not only, and from a selfish standpoint, I initially started it for my kids. I wanted them to see an example. There's a stigma that comes along with being a professional athlete and what all goes into that. And so selfishly for me, I wanted my kids to be able to see me and how I handle myself on a day-to-day basis, how I treated people, the things I said to people, and then to carry it over into the community. I felt as a quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, not only was I a leader in that locker room, but I felt like I was a leader in the community as well. So the way I treated people and handled people and walked my day-to-day life, that was an important part for me. And I think it's even more important in today's environment, as we talked about with social media and what's going on, being that positive influence, that positive impact for the people closest to you.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to say to both of you how proud I am to be your pastor and how grateful I am for the way you live out your faith and the way that you've sought to win and be champions of the game of life, not just on the field, but off the field. And you do that in magnificent ways. Thank you, both of you. And part of the reason why I wanted us to be able to hear from Kevin and from Trent is to be able to see that when we're talking about being champions, being champions isn't just the score you put up or the numbers you put up. It has to do with how you live your life, your character. It has to do with knowing that you are a champion because God made you and you were fearfully and wonderfully made. It has to do with loving and serving like a champion, that we are giving ourselves away for other people. And in doing that, we find what life is really all about. And then finally, it has to do with actually walking and talking like a champion, that our words might give grace and bless those who hear. I want that to be true of you today. So I'd like to invite you to bow with me for our prayer. Would you bow with me? And as your head is bowed and your eyes closed, I want to remind you that to become a Christian, Kevin talked about the year that he became a Christian, the third year in the NFL. To become a Christian is really simple. If you aren't one already or you're not sure, it really is to say one simple prayer, one three-letter word, yes. Yes, God, I believe that you are there. Yes, I believe that you love me. Yes, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to serve you. I want to be a champion for you. I'd like to invite you to just whisper under your breath to God right now, yes. Lord, you hear our yes to you, our yes to your invitation. Help us. Help us that we might know and truly believe deep down inside that we belong to you and we have sacred worth and value because of you. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Help us, O Lord, to live like a champion, loving and serving other people every day. And help us, O Lord, to not only walk the walk, but with our words to also talk the talk. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for watching this week's sermon. We'd love for you to join us again online or live in worship. To learn more about Church of the Resurrection, please visit core.org. Have a great week.